Well, thank you and good morning. Thanks for joining us. Today we are here to talk about this report, Immigration Detention in California, our fourth report from the California DOJ pursuant to our statutory duty to conduct regular reports. We're announcing today its release and going to talk about some of what we found in this report on immigration detention facilities operating in California, where non-citizens are detained by Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE. In this report, we detailed the conditions of confinement at the 6 immigration detention facilities in the state. All are privately operated by groups like GEO and Core Civic, MTC. It's critical that more than ever, with the federal administration's efforts to eliminate oversight and overcrowd these facilities, that we shine a light on what's happening inside, on the conditions of confinement, on where standards of care are falling short, where they're falling short of the standards of care, especially when the president is pushing an inhumane campaign of mass immigration enforcement. This work is critical. So before we dive in, I'd like to thank my colleagues at DOJ, in particular our Civil Rights Enforcement Section and Research Services, for putting this report together. I have Kelly and Vilma with me here as well, who were instrumental in doing this work, engaged in the inspections and putting together the report that we are presenting to you today. And here in California, as always, we're focused on the facts. We're focused on data. They are our North Star, and our findings make it clear that these private immigration detention facilities need significant improvement to address the needs of the people held in their facilities. My office is focused on ensuring accountability and transparency. One way we're doing that is by arming the public with information. Building off the focus of our previous reports, which offered a comprehensive review of a number of different issues, including conditions of confinement, the standard of care provided to detained individuals, COVID-19, pandemic response protocols, and due process protections at detention facilities operating in the state. This report, our fourth report, examines these matters and is comprehensive, covers all of the issues. But in addition, it takes a deeper dive. It hones in on mental health challenges because that issue was flagged in prior reports, and we wanted to go deeper and share more detail about that particular issue. So you'll see a lot about the mental health care in these facilities, or rather lack thereof, and I'll share some of the details about that shortly. We found that this focused review was necessary because our previous findings identified inadequate mental health care services at the detention facilities, and that's particularly concerning, of course, because those facilities are working with a population that's at high risk for adverse mental health outcomes. With support from correctional and healthcare experts, my team conducted a review of the 6 immigration detention facilities in California. And just to go over those quickly, Golden State Annex and Mesa Verde in Kern County, Adelanto Detention Facility and Desert View Annex in San Bernardino County, and Imperial Regional Detention Facility in Imperial County, and finally the Otay Mesa Detention Center in San Diego County, which I actually personally visited back in 2021 when I was first became Attorney General. We toured each facility as part of this report and closely reviewed and analyzed the logs, the policies, the detainee records, and other documentation. We also interviewed detention staff and 154 detained individuals from the various facilities, and I'll just say that what we found was alarming. At certain facilities, detained individuals were over-disciplined, including for simply making a complaint. At some facilities, there were lapses in ensuring detained individuals were receiving treatment for infectious diseases, and the quality and timeliness of diagnostic health care was severely lacking. This means that not only did issues from our previous findings persist, have not been cured, have not been transformed, have not been addressed, but when we dove even deeper into these facilities, we recognized it was also severely impacting the mental health of detained individuals. Starting with the fact that medical and mental health records contained significant inaccuracies that impacted care. Record keeping and maintenance and review of healthcare files at all 6 facilities were deficient. And without these records, providers aren't able to create and implement adequate treatment plans. We also identified weaknesses in suicide prevention and intervention strategies in every facility. These strategies are necessary because of the high suicide risk in detained populations. At different facilities, we identified disproportionate use of force against individuals with mental health diagnoses, and staff appeared to overutilize discipline and use of force. ICE standards of care are supposed to require staff to consider mental health conditions prior to engaging in calculated use of force incidents. In addition to this, facilities didn't conduct mental health reviews required by ICE's detention standards before placing people in solitary confinement. And that's important because some detained people spent periods of several months to over a year in conditions of isolation, which is harmful for any detained person, but presents particular risk to those with underlying mental health conditions. At some facilities, people with mental health conditions were placed in isolation more frequently and for longer periods of time. None of the facilities consistently offered adequate psychotherapy services. While all facilities offered psychiatry alone isn't enough to support a mental health program, particularly when serving a population with high rates of depression and post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. My team and I are highly concerned by the Mesa Verde facilities pat-down search policy, where detained persons were subjected to pat-down searches anytime they left their housing unit. Detained individuals described invasive searches that had a chilling effect on their decisions about whether or not they wanted to leave their unit to receive medical and mental health services or even meals. So they were intimidated into not even getting their meals or getting their health care or their mental health services. This pat-down policy also resulted in allegations of sexual assault and numerous complaints from detained people against facility staff. And finally, detention facilities didn't consistently satisfy their obligations to support detained people to ensure that mental health conditions didn't negatively impact their immigration outcomes. For example, my office received reports that detained people appeared for court without having received prescribed medication or other needed treatment, which meant they couldn't meaningfully participate in their own immigration hearings. In California, detained people who have serious mental health illnesses and impairments are entitled to legal representation, and these facilities often didn't adequately inform people of this right. Under the Trump administration, we expect immigration enforcement and detention to increase across the country, and including in California. The number of individuals held in California's facilities has spiked already from around 2,300 detainees during our 2023 review to around 3,100 individuals held in detention as of this month in 2025. So from 2,300 to 3,100. This number will only continue to skyrocket as a result of the president's inhumane immigration policies. DOJ's report of California's immigration detention facilities shows that previously identified issues have persisted, as I mentioned earlier, and will only worsen as detention numbers increase. Our findings also reveal that these detention facilities need drastic improvements to address the disregard of the mental health needs of people held there. So it's a sobering and stark and dark picture that we saw when we conducted our inspections. And much that is not being done that is substandard, and much that needs to be done to get to the appropriate standards of care and appropriate conditions of confinement in the 6 immigration detention centers privately run here in California. At DOJ, it's our mission to ensure safe and dignified and just living conditions for all our residents, including people who are detained at immigration detention facilities. The new federal administration has been volatile, and while we don't know exactly what's to come, one of the certainties of this administration is uncertainty. While we don't know exactly what's to come in the next few years, we do know that we're better off when we let the facts and the data guide us. And that's what we're presenting to you, to California, to policy leaders in our report. And these reports come at a critical time. DOJ has published, again, 4 reports so far. We'll continue to review and report on what we see in immigration detention centers, because justice relies on and demands transparency. So we will do our job to provide that needed and necessary transparency. Before I close, I want to take a moment to thank my team who made this report possible, and then I'll open it up to any questions that you might have. Cristina Gutierrez, Rosalind Cantu, Trinidad Ocampo, Dalen Thrift Viveros, Alex Flores, Anna Rick, Chloe Willis, Mirna Cintron Valentin, Dominique Alcaraz, Kelly Burns, Vilma Palma Solana, Kelly and Vilma I mentioned before are here with me now, Marissa Malouf, Michael Newman, and Jackie Gonzalez. And now I am happy to take any questions you might have. Yeah.
And so when you guys were trying to do the report, did the group try to prevent state investigators from going into the facilities, or did they delay or cause problems for state investigators to go into the facilities and do their inspections?
I'll say, maybe I'll make some comments, and then either you want to add something after I make these comments. This report is coming out in 2025. Our last report was in 2022. So part of that was due to us making sure we had all the information we needed to provide, to present the report, write it, make sure that we were covering all the bases. So maybe I'll let my team members who are engaged directly with the for-profit private companies that run these immigration detention centers share a little more if you wish.
Yes, in the report you will see that we did have some difficulties getting information, particularly from jail facilities. That's not something new. We have documented that in our prior reports. Vilma Palma Solana.
Thank you, Vilma. Yes, sir.
You mentioned some of the individuals were over-disciplined. If you can kind of details on that over-discipline. And then one of the concerns, speaking with family members that have people detained in the detention centers, they say they don't often get the treatment or they don't often get the medicine that they need. Some people go in with, very special, the need for medicine. And so what can you do, or what are you doing for to make sure that these people get that medication? You can go for it. It's 2 questions.
Yeah. So on the over-disciplining question, the first question, I'm going to let one of my colleagues talk about that in a second, but let me take your second question first. I've been very involved in this issue from before the time I became the Attorney General of the state of California. I authored a bill called AB 32, which looked at these for-profit private immigration detention centers as well as for-profit private prisons, and reviewed the conditions therein and determined that the incentives are all wrong for providing adequate and appropriate care, including health care, including the things that you've mentioned, like providing medications and access to health care and the medicine that those that are in the detention centers need. The whole incentive is to cut services and minimize staffing and minimize responsiveness in order to maximize profit. And so it is a system that's broken fundamentally, in my opinion, and the incentives are all wrong. And so it is absolutely no surprise, though it is no less tragic, that what you have just said is happening inside these facilities. And that's what our report details in multiple ways. And so I had a bill that became the law of the state of California that banned for-profit private prisons and for-profit private immigration detention centers. For-profit private prisons are still banned by that law, AB 32. But the federal administration challenged the for-profit private detention center ban part of the bill, and this office, the California DOJ, defended the bill in court. And unfortunately, the court found that that ban was not something that could continue to be legally enforceable, so the detention centers are allowed to exist. But we do hope that in terms of what can we do about it, what can we do about the fact that people aren't getting access to health care or their prescribed medicines, that is the whole point of this report. We are shedding a light on it. We are daylighting this fact and this unacceptable set of circumstances so that policymakers, including those in Congress and the federal government know what's happening in these facilities that federal tax dollars fund. And if they think it's appropriate, and I can't see how they would, for people who need medicine to not get medicine, then they can continue the status quo. But if they think it needs to be changed and that people deserve a level of humanity and decency and appropriate standard of care, then they can make the changes, because as policymakers, it is in their jurisdiction to do so. So over-disciplined examples, I'll let one of my teammates take that one.
Thank you. And thank you for the question. We reviewed, as AG Bonta discussed, we spoke with detained individuals. We also reviewed files that showed reasons for discipline, lengths of time that people were disciplined. So there are a number of different anecdotal ones. I'll raise one in particular. We did talk about people receiving discipline for making complaints or for otherwise exercising their rights. And this example actually goes to the original question about Geo Group as well. There was a period of time that a number of detainees were on hunger strike to protest the low wages that were associated with the voluntary work program. It was just $1 a day. And there was a calculated use of force used against them. And these detainees were transferred to another facility out of state in response to this hunger strike. And related to Geo Group, this was a use of force that they did not report to California DOJ when we were inspecting, nor did they report to DHS, OIG when they were inspecting, and we both found out about it otherwise. But despite asking for records of those uses of force, we did not receive them. So that's a particularly egregious example, but there are a number of similar examples where detainees reported to us of having engaged in regular behaviors but receiving discipline for such things. My name's Kelly Burns.
Any other questions? Yes, hi.
Hi. What is the time period of these inspections and that we're looking at here?
The business from 2023, and we would be records starting from 2021 to 23.
Right. So the inspections were in the calendar year of 2023, and the records included 2023 and look back as far as 2021. So 2021 to 2023 for records, 2023 for inspections.
Okay. Understanding that we're talking about numbers that are from 2023, from 2023, what is your sense of these conditions happening currently at ICE facilities?
More of the same. I mean, the trajectory that we've seen in all of our reports, this is our fourth report, nothing has changed except for things getting worse. Issues that we flag are not getting addressed. Conditions of confinement continue to be substandard. We did a deep dive, of course, into mental health to show and reveal all the different ways that mental health care conditions are substandard. So, and we think that with the march of time, as well as the increase in volume, it's only going to get worse. They are not able to provide medicine that is prescribed to patients. They're not able to provide the reviews and of patients that is needed. If they can't do it now, how are they going to do it when the numbers increase, unless they make some drastic changes?
Follow-up question on the one. Who do you, now that you have this data, who do you speak to at the federal level, and especially now that there's been some reductions at the federal level for oversight? So who do you speak to, and how do you get feedback from them?
I think Congress is really important in their role. They have the power of the purse. They can appropriate funding. They can renew contracts or not. They can put conditions on contracts that require certain standards to be met and conditions to be achieved within these facilities. So I think Congress is really important. Our congressional delegation is someone who I would speak to, given my relationship with them. But Congress across the country has a role in making sure that the health, safety, and welfare of the people that are touched by the investments that they make and the funds that they appropriate, that it's at a appropriate, humane, and level that is current with the existing standards of practice.
My last question, moving forward. My last question is moving forward, forward-looking. When do you anticipate you'll start on your next report? What do you anticipate that report will focus on?
Great question, and maybe I'll ask my colleagues about the second part of that question. But we're always in motion. So when we're just at different parts of a report, either finishing and presenting, this report to all of you and talking about it and answering your questions so that you know what's inside, or starting the next one and starting to schedule our next set of inspections and get our experts together and start requesting and reviewing documents. As you can tell, there are hundreds and thousands of hours of staff review time and work to do it all. So it sort of never ends. And so we will be moving from a conclusion of this report into the beginning of our fifth report. But I'll let my team members. Is there anything that we'll be focused on? Okay, talk about what might we be focused on in the next report.
Well, AB 103 requires us to focus on the conditions of confinement, the standard of care, and due process. And given everything that we're seeing right now with regards to due process, while we'll be looking at everything, we will have a particular focus on that. And as the AG mentioned, we never stop. So we are already planning for the next set of reviews. AB 103 sunsets on July 1st of 2027, but we will continue doing the reports for as long as the legislature wants us to continue doing them.
Sir, over the past few months, I've spoken to 3 different tourists who've been denied entry at the San Diego border and then placed in detention in San Diego. In one case, one of the tourists was put in solitary confinement. All 3 of them told me they had no idea when they were going to get out until we ran our stories. Can we get your reaction to tourists being detained in San Diego?
Sure. Shocking, though sadly not surprising. For these detention centers, I'm not really surprised by any of the completely unacceptable practices, conditions, examples, unfortunately, because that's the reputation they've earned through their own conduct for years. But certainly they need to be held accountable for the conditions that they provide and any rights that they're violating. Those whose rights are violated should be vindicated, and perhaps some of those tourists that you've just discussed have rights that have been violated by these detention centers and can seek relief and remedy in court.
And as Attorney General, is there anything you can do to intervene in the treatment of people in these detention centers? We've had several reports come out over the years. Here we are today with yet another one.
Yeah, as I mentioned before, I did that as a legislator. California did that by voting for my legislation and making it the law of the state of California. They thought the conditions and the practices inside these detention centers were so bad they should be completely prohibited. And unfortunately that was struck down. So because these are federal detention centers, there is a limit on what I can do, what the California legislature can do. The authority rests more with the federal government, particularly Congress. Our California congressional delegation, I know, is very interested in this report. They have reached out to me. Members of that delegation have reached out to me in the past to get input on what is in our report. We wrote a letter to our congressional delegation as they were considering the contracts with these for-profit private operators for these facilities, and I know that they were very shocked by what we shared about what was happening inside. So our role here is more to shine the light, provide the report, arm policymakers who want evidence-based policy and data-driven policy with the evidence, with the data, so that they can do what's right and what's humane and what's fair and what's appropriate. So Congress really will take the ball and take the baton from us to take action.
If you can, could you speak specifically about your findings at Core Civic and Otay Mesa?
Do you guys want to do that at all?
Yes, anything more specific?
Yeah. I think just look at San Diego and what we saw here. Or was it more sort of general?
Okay. Focusing on the mental health focus of this report in particular, Otay Mesa had no psychologist, and so nobody was able to receive therapy. They did have psychiatry, as every facility did, but I think the biggest thing that hampered Otay Mesa in providing mental health care was that they had very low staff and were, as a result, not able to really offer any psychotherapy whatsoever, and only some psychiatry to to detained individuals who were in that facility.
Is that common or?
Yes and no. So some facilities did not have any psychologists or any social workers or anyone able to provide counseling. There was always psychiatry, but sometimes there was the opportunity for some therapy. Although even facilities that did have therapy, it would provide very short sessions, which we had concerns about whether the therapeutic effect was really possible to come from the amount of time that that psychologists or other counselors were spending with detained individuals, and some just did not have the staffing to provide even that.
How much of a difference can a psychologist make at a facility like Oklahoma? It's up to saving lives. Why is it important to have a psychologist?
As Attorney General Bonta mentioned, given that among the highest number of the most common conditions that you see among this population is post-traumatic stress disorder and depression, and both of those treatment requires both psychiatry and therapy. There's no pill that cures a trauma. You really need to process the trauma. You need to have a safe space with a trusted counselor, and that's not something that's available. And of course, it's always hard to provide these services in conditions of confinement. That's not going to feel safe just by definition, but what can be offered by someone who is a counselor is maybe the detained person can even just find an hour a week that they're sitting with someone who will listen to them and treat them with the respect that you need in order to go through a healing process. And that's not something that's happening. And I think it can be a question of life and death, particularly if you're thinking about depression and suicidality associated with depression.
Detainees are told it's really hard to get a call out, have to wake up early, fight for a tablet. In the case of the tourists, they had no idea when they were going to get out. Did you find any instances where detainees were not given proper access to the phones, use a lawyer, or a tablet, to contact their lawyer to make a call and find out what the next step was in that?
I think that's something that's going to be very associated with how many detainees are there. We did find, when we visited the units, you would always see that there were a certain number of tablets and phones, and so certainly as the population increases, that's going to be more difficult. A problem that we definitely did see was that a lot of the services, both to contact people in the outside world or to make requests, to file grievances, to ask for a medical appointment, were done through the tablets. And many of the tablets, you need to understand English, French, or Spanish in order to even understand the instructions for the tablet. And so then detained people who speak any of the other languages, the many languages that are represented in the facilities, didn't have as easy a time, needed to have somebody help them even get into the tablet in order to ask for anything that they needed.
This might be a little off topic, but just while we have you here to maybe get your reaction, earlier this morning, the judge issued an injunction in the District of California to keep Border Patrol from doing substantive stops or like warrantless stops, where they just pull anybody over that looks Latino or anybody that looks like they may be a farm worker. It's for the Eastern District of California, but is that kind of like the law of the land now? And does the AG's office kind of do anything to enforce that or monitor that? And then just kind of your reaction to it. We saw Border Patrol yesterday just go up. El Centro Border Patrol go up to Kern County and do the same kind of thing of just stopping anybody that they think might be undocumented. And so the judge just told them this morning they can't do that.
Yeah. In my view, that's existing law, and the judge's order reflects existing law and makes it very specific to conduct that presumably was presented to the judge, and so the judge wanted to issue a specific order. But you generally, before you can stop or detain anybody, you need either a reasonable suspicion or probable cause to enter homes or to effectuate an arrest. Oftentimes, a search warrant. That's sort of foundational Fourth Amendment U.S. constitutional law. You can't racially profile people. You can't indiscriminately just stop people and search them without any appropriate reasonable suspicion or probable cause or without a warrant. So sounds like the judge had seen enough and wanted to issue an order. This is something that we've been focusing on since before the inauguration. We've always said that the federal government may lawfully enforce immigration law. They have the right to do that. They have resources to do that, including ICE, but they may not break the law. They may not invoke without authority certain laws like the Alien Enemies Act or the Insurrection Act and use the military inappropriately on American soil. They can't violate your Fourth Amendment rights. They can't racially profile you. They can't detain you endlessly if they were ever able to even detain you in the first place. So there's rules, and this judge is reminding the federal immigration enforcers about what those rules are, presumably in view of the conduct that he or she has seen.
The Trump administration has promised to go after sanctuary jurisdictions. How are you preparing for that as Attorney General of California?
I'm aware of what the Trump administration had announced yesterday, and honestly, part of what he was trying to announce was his record on immigration enforcement, and he has really failed to accomplish what he's stated, what he has indicated he wanted to accomplish. He's deported less people than Biden, and he said he wanted to have a mass deportation machine, the likes of which America has never seen before. So failure already within 100 days based on that promise. He also said he was going to focus on undocumented violent criminals. And on day one, he went after U.S. citizens with an executive order to revoke the birthright citizenship, a U.S. constitutional right. He was able to successfully deport a 2-year-old citizen last week, and has gone after lawful programs like temporary protected status and our asylum and refugee. So he's failing, but he's trying to present some success because he's a salesman, as he did yesterday. And he also, part of that was he was going to have his team research and identify the different sanctuary jurisdictions, which are all public and well known. There are decisions made in public to decide what sort of approach you're going to have in your state. There's a law that's been in the books since 2017 in California, SB 54, our California Values Act, which is our decision to use our limited and valuable law enforcement resources to fight crime, to go after murderers and rapists and folks involved in robbery and fentanyl and hate crimes and human trafficking and organized retail crime, and not to do the job of the federal government for civil immigration enforcement when they have huge departments like ICE that do this already. A very unremarkable proposition that we want to focus on crime and health, safety, and welfare of our people. It's like if someone was had a job in an office, a worker, and they went over to another worker and they said, hey, will you do my job for me? And that person said, no, I respectfully decline to do your job for you. I'm going to focus on my job. But you're welcome to do your job. In that example, that's what the federal government is trying to say to the state of California. They want us to do their job for them when they can just do their job. We are focused on other priorities in our state, including mostly fighting crime. So we have a law on this issue. Like, this issue is addressed in Trump administration 1.0, U.S. versus California. It has already upheld our California Values Act, SB 54. It's completely lawful. The idea that he's going to go after us for a completely lawful position that the Constitution and the 10th Amendment gives us authority to take is, like many of his other approaches, crazy, unlawful, and unfounded in any legal authority. Besides, it's just what he wants to do. He wants to go after people that disagree with him. He's done it with attorneys. He's done it with judges. He's done it with blue states, and seemingly he wants to do it again with those folks that, in his words, he calls sanctuary. But it's all right. We've been thinking about this for months before the election. From the election to the inauguration, from the inauguration to now, we're ready. What he announced yesterday is wholly unremarkable.
Question, based on that, how do you think the next report is going to be based on the Trump administration and the immigration policies?
I think we're going to see a lot more impacted people because we'll see an increase in population inside the detention centers. Based on what we've seen in the past, they will even have a harder time meeting minimum standards of care. And based on what this Trump administration has already demonstrated with its inability to provide legal due process to individuals, like deporting a 2-year-old U.S. citizen, like deporting an individual who has an order saying he can't be deported and not bringing him back home even today after he's been in another country wrongfully deported for weeks. We anticipate additional violations of due process. And so, as mentioned before by my colleagues, I think the next report will focus quite a bit on due process, or rather violations thereof, and failures to provide adequate due process. Thank you, everybody.